Welcome to the Ripple of Change podcast, searching for our quadruple aim, where we highlight, celebrate, and extol others in healthcare and beyond doing amazing things. I'm your host, Dr. Otten, and today's topic is the power of peer support. I'm joined by two amazing human beings, also both physicians, Dr. Paul Buehrens, who is a family physician, CMO of SyncMD, and honestly has the best blue glasses I've ever seen. And our guest today is Dr. Dominic Corrigan, a recovering psychiatrist, co-founder, and intentionally faceless face of Physicians Anonymous, which is confidential as well. Having said that, Paul, I'm going to shoot it over to you for the first question.
Thanks a lot, Todd. You're right. I'm jumping in with both feet into a format I've never been in before, so this is new to me. The first question I have for Dr. Corrigan is, since I can't see his face, is he does have a face up in front of me. Whose face is that anyway?
That's a great question, Paul. So this is the official, as I believe it, the official, one of the official sort of etchings of the real Dominic Corrigan, who was an 18th century Irish physician. And he is known for things like Corrigan's pulse, the old water hammer pulse, which probably in the British school you might have learned about, or certainly I did, but and Corrigan's sign and a few others. But why I've used him is because he had Corrigan's door, which was a secret little passageway somewhere between his consulting rooms in Dublin, Ireland, and he used to escape into those between consultations every now and then, and had some sort of reboot and replenish to deal with burnout in his own special way. I don't know what he got up to in that room, but it was secret, it was supportive, it was warm, in my head anyway, and that's kind of why I love that idea, and that's one of the inspirations for Physicians Anonymous, is creating a safe place. Having said that, ideally, it wouldn't need to be secret in future. Ideally, we physicians wouldn't have to have a secret door, that we could actually talk about our struggles and our successes more openly than we do at the moment. But I guess that's something that hopefully we could discuss today.
Sounds good. I wonder if Dr. Corrigan was doing something that today he would get into a lot of trouble for, other than drinking, like dallying with the nurses, or like one of my doctors did, watching porn. Oh, no, he wasn't watching porn. There wasn't any back then.
Hold on. I got to double click on that for a second. I was debating, was he using it to get away from administrators who was trying to get more productivity out of him? That's what I was wondering.
If they had invented clipboards then definitely he would try to get away from them. Yeah. Thank God. I think the only saving grace was they didn't have the electronic health record back then.
Yes. Well, if I had an escape room like that, I would have used it to complete my chart notes, so I wouldn't have to do it at night.
Yep. Pajama time.
Exactly. So since we're into humor, can you tell us the funniest story from your life in medicine that you can think of right now, Dr. Corrigan?
I was thinking about this, and I have like a mental list of hilarious medical stories for like dinner parties, and none of them are actually appropriate for public consumption on a polite podcast that may be listened to by civilians or possibly children. So I really struggle with this one, but I'll kind of tell you that this happened in an anonymous country in Africa where, and it wasn't me, but it was some two friends of mine were doing a period of time. And in this rural hospital, what you had to do was everything, because there were literally about 5 doctors covering a vast population. So, for example, in this rural hospital, and it just gives me such gratitude for what we have in the West, right? But in this hospital, you would literally do the general anesthetic, a rapid sequence induction for a pregnant woman, and then leave the patient, hopefully intubated and stable, and then do the cesarean section with a nurse at the head end, at the anesthetic end. And this was not that, okay, maybe 20 years ago, maybe a bit longer. So not that long ago. But anyway, so one of the outpatient procedures they had, and there was a huge waiting list, was in this particular country was male circumcisions, because there was a cultural thing, and you could either have it done by a local traditional healer, but they unfortunately had a high sepsis rate, and the population then rather went to the Western hospital. And of course, my two friends had never actually done a circumcision before. And so it was when I trained anyway, it was see one, do one, teach one. So see everyone nodding here.
There's gray hairs here.
Yeah. So I think we share a few gray hairs here. So yeah, so it was textbook out, patient on the table, local anesthetic in, and I forget the name of the particular clamp that you use, but anyway, the clamp was applied and the snips were made, and then the colleague A went, "Oh God, I can't find what should still be there in situ." And the other one said, "Let me have a look." "No, I can't find it either." And they both sort of went pale and went, "Oh crumbs, have we just caused some serious damage here with our first textbook surgery?" And then a very experienced nursing colleague stepped in and said, no, doctors, this is what you do." And thank God the penis was intact, the circumcision was uneventful, the patient was happy, and they, having done one, were successfully able to go on and teach many enthusiastic medical students going forward. But a hair-raising moment for everyone concerned, no doubt.
I've got to piggyback on this because it parallels so much with it. The see one, do one, teach one, literally when, well, I guess I won't say where I was, but saw one vasectomy, and then the next one was, "Okay, go ahead and do it, Todd." And the attending leaves the room, and I'm like, holy smokes. I think it was an intern at the time, but there's a corollary here to the funny story, because I'm going to piggyback on that from a genitourinary perspective. When I was in the Navy doing physicals, a lot of the pilots and navigators like to have some fun at my expense at times, I suppose. And I distinctly remember doing a flight physical, and we were getting ready to check this particular gentleman out for hernias. And so I had him drop his drawers, and there was a picture of me taped to his private area. right smack. Oh my goodness, is that funny? Good stuff.
I tell you, dark humor, there's something special about medical dark humor that just keeps us going. Yeah, I really had to think carefully about the story I told you and really keep my filters intact, especially in dinner party situations, because sometimes it's hard to read the room. Like a group of 6 to 10 medics around a dinner table, it gets pretty raucous, and yeah, you have to moderate it for civilians. But I also think that's a symptom, right? So with my psychiatric hat on, I'm going, we're exposed to an enormous amount of human suffering. The best moments of your life, the worst moments of your life, the last moment of your life, we're exposed to it all as jobbing physicians. And I think over the decades, centuries, physicians have just developed this dark humor to cope with it. And I think generally it's a healthy coping mechanism. But I've also had to reflect sometimes. I'm like, hang on, that actually isn't that funny to non-medics. That's kind of sad. That's kind of tragic. And I think it covers up a multitude of what I've termed in some of the Physicians Anonymous writings, multitude of micro traumas. And certainly when I had my crash and burn and went into therapy, I started to recognize these micro traumas starting from way back in medicine. I never mind the ones in my life before, but just we're exposed to so much. I just remember, they still stick with me. The tragic cases that just, should never happen to another human being. Yet that we were there, and then the system just like swallowed up that whatever happened, and then you just go on with the next one because there were 20, 30, 50 patients waiting to be seen. So yeah, I think medicine is beautiful. It has its we're so privileged to be there, but there's also a burden that comes with it.
Yeah, you're dead right on that, and I think most of the time our humor is pretty good. You reminded me of the book The House of God, written by an intern at quote best medical school unquote, which we all know now was Harvard, and he's now been exposed. He used a pseudonym writing his book, and it's become the book that every intern has to read. But it's filled with patient abuse. It's
Totally.
It's filled with comments about patients that are just, the kinds of things that you can get sued for, and it's long outdated, but brilliant.
Yeah.
And your trauma comment also reminded me of my C1 do one. My most vivid memory of a C1 do one is having to do a spinal tap on a 5-year-old. I watched it done once, and the next time the kid had to have it done, which was frequently because he was getting his spinal fluid checked for leukemia cells while in treatment. And the shocking thing is I was an intern, and that was in the 70s, but I still remember his name. I've never forgotten the kid's name.
Yeah.
It was very traumatic for me to have to do an LP on that poor kid.
Yep. Well, and I think that speaks to, the importance of the topic we're rolling into here with peer support. And Dominic, we've talked a little bit, but I would love to revisit the origin of Physicians Anonymous and how you came up with that and where it's at now. I think that'd be fantastic.
Thank you. Sure. So I had my crash and burn around the time of COVID. So it was a triple whammy of burnout, addiction, and mental illness. So it was something that I'd sort of coped with in different ways and different severities for years and years. I was the kind of smiling, competent, the guy that you went to when you needed something done. And I was super busy. I've now worked out that I'm also a workaholic. But that's not my only addiction. And so it all kind of came crashing to a halt, and I ended up ultimately leaving clinical practice. And then when the dust had settled and I'd got some good help and got, good therapists, good medication, and entered into a 12-step program based on the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was a complete eye-opener to me. So I worked in addictions as a psychiatrist for many years and always used to refer patients to 12-step programs, but never really got it until I was in. And it was an incredibly powerful program. And just to walk into a room, be able to tell my deepest shame and secrets to a bunch of people who I didn't know, but to realize that I would be not judged, I would not be kicked out of the room, I would not be laughed at, I would be accepted and even loved, and supported and helped and encouraged, was very powerful for me. Because for decades, I was that smiling, suffering physician, but I would never reach out for help. I was too proud, I was in denial, I was too successful, and I was enjoying life too much at some level. I was enjoying the successes of being a successful physician, right? But inside, I was not coping with the micro traumas. I was subject to some bullying, and my coping mechanisms got increasingly unhelpful and unhealthy. So that's kind of where we ended up, was this career and life train smash. And then when the dust cleared, I was like, what would have helped me? What would have helped me before I derailed? And what are the main barriers for me getting help? And there were fear, there were denial, there were pride. But and then I looked at the research, and the research was physicians are afraid of reaching out. We do not want to appear imperfect. We do not want to get mental health or burnout or addiction or anything on our permanent record. We don't want an insurance record. We don't want to have to deal with credentialing authorities and registering authorities. And it's the same in many, many Western countries. The US and the UK are particularly bad for it, but it's the same in many places. And so, yeah, I thought, well, what can we do? We can't solve this incredibly complex problem of physician well-being, but we can provide safe spaces for people, peer support. And so I did the research on peer support, and it's a very powerful intervention. And there's another interesting study that shows that, vast numbers of us, up to 62% of us, are struggling with burnout at the moment. That's the latest Medscape statistic, right? A good well over 20% of us are struggling with depression and anxiety. We have higher rates of suicidal ideation, suicidal thinking, and completed suicide than matched populations. So we have a serious mental health epidemic going on, which is under the covers. People do not reach out for help, myself included. But the surveys show that physicians would consider talking to another physician as a peer, not necessarily as a treating physician,
Right.
Because that dynamic is different. So I thought, you know what, peer support saved my life. Maybe we can replicate some of the best of 12 steps and some of the other stuff I've learned along the way and create a not-for-profit that will help physicians. Having said that, in an ideal world, we would not need to exist. So in an ideal world, it would be safe for physicians to get help. They wouldn't need to fear that they're getting a course of Prozac back in the 10 years ago for a mild depression, anxiety, that they shouldn't have to fear that could be used against them in a litigation discovery down the line. They shouldn't have to fear getting help for a problem before it becomes a dependency, before it becomes incapacitating or impairing. Unfortunately, in many states and in many countries, that is the case. So yeah, we want us to become obsolete eventually, but we know that we're a long way from that. So if we can help people in a safe and anonymous space, that's what we're going to do.
I think that's great. You haven't said anything I could disagree with. I think there are some other aspects that strike me in listening to you talk about Physicians Anonymous. I know personally, I discovered early on in practice that one of the things that would really save me from burnout was simply to get a week's vacation about every 12 weeks. I really needed a week off to decompress from the pressure of private practice. I don't think that I completely implemented that, but I think it was a good idea. The second thing that happened to me in my own life in medicine was to discover that becoming a medical director like you did, Todd, actually was a saving grace, because it gives admittedly false, but it gives a sense of control of the future and of your fate to be a medical director. And my experience is people who do that often work 20 or 30% more time than the average doc. For 100% pay, you get 125% work. But nevertheless, yeah, you're laughing because it's true.
I was just thinking what they used to say in the Navy. What does good work get you? More work.
More work. And, if you want to get a job done, give it to a busy person.
Exactly.
So yeah, workaholism. But the real comment I wanted to get to is I believe that this is entirely built into our training. And, we're selected for it to get into medical school. You've got to memorize organic chemistry to get into medical school, which, is a chore that no one should ever have to do because it's worthless. But at the end of the day, those who are willing to do worthless chores and are obsessive compulsive enough to memorize every bone in the human body, we become physicians. And so let's go to humor, because I think humor is a big saving grace. So I'm living with Leslie, and when Leslie and I started dating, she told one of her girlfriends she was dating a doctor, and she said, "You're dating a doctor? They're all assholes." And then she told me that, because that's what she does. She tells me things that I probably shouldn't hear, including that one. And I said, "Oh, well, if you mean someone who's trained to be an autonomous agent who orders other people around and expects them to fulfill all those orders to the letter? Yeah, that's us. And, with all of the privilege that we have from that kind of autonomy and leadership comes the damage of not being collaborative, of being autonomous and not being able to ask for help, of being independent. That's all bad for you. So there you go. We got a bunch of burnt out doctors. And well, I'll stop in a second. I want you to talk, but we all seem to think today that this is all caused by the pandemic. No, it isn't. The burnout rate was probably 45% before the pandemic.
Yep.
And the largest cause even then was electronic medical records. And now it's that and this and administrators and billing and coding and pajama time and pandemic and ungrateful patients and people who don't believe us because the internet knows more than we do. It's a real cluster.
We're gonna need at least like 6 or 7 episodes probably to unwind all of this. So much gold in there, Paul, and I agree with you, frankly. I mean, the issues pre-existed the pandemic, in my opinion, that poured gasoline on the fires that were already there, and now things have accelerated, and unfortunately, we have many who are leaving the profession or struggling with substance use or mental health issues, what have you. Dominic, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh, so much to say, Paul, as you say, that Todd, there's so many nuggets of gold there, but 100%. So, I was burning out, and the stats were something around 30 to 40% pre, 60 odd percent post pandemic, and now during, and then as I said, the latest Medscape 62%. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and in a way it allowed me and many others it forced me to have a break, but allowed many others to reconsider their work-life balance in medicine. And I think as a result we have things like quiet quitting, we have people who are just setting up their own independent practices, cash-only businesses, all sorts of ideal medical practices that are not subject to insurers, etc., etc. And we have projections from, I forget which study it was, but we're going to be short tens of thousands of physicians, never mind nurses, never mind therapists, over the next decades, because A, we're not training enough, and B, people are leaving. And in the US, one of the reasons I only discovered on this Physicians Anonymous journey, one of the reasons why we're not training enough physicians is because of an archaic, I think 1994 regulation that limits the number of residency places, because those are federally funded. Patient complexity has gone up, numbers of patients, population have gone up, illness prevalences have gone up, so you're going to need more physicians. But at the same time, where we haven't increased the number of specialist training positions commensurately. So, there's so many systemic issues. Electronic health records preceded the pandemic. They were meant to improve things, but they are always within the top 3 offenders of causes of burnout in any survey you do of physicians. Administrative burden and lack of time off are always the other top 2 and 3. So yeah, we don't take time off, or we don't get time off, and we need it to recharge our batteries from the intensity, and I would say the adrenaline, in a good and bad way, that is modern medical practice. Some lovely, very supportive groups like we're developing are not going to solve the systemic issues. So it's a much wider thing, very much aligned with the quadruple A, and we do need ripples of change. We need tsunamis of change, really. But let's start with ripples.
Oh, that's a wonderful thought, and obviously I'm love the concept of ripples of change for obvious reasons, and we don't need to get into that. But I think that the work you're doing speaks to what can be done at a smaller level to help individuals that are struggling. And I'd like to dig into maybe the structure of that a little bit for those that aren't familiar. I think that'd be fascinating. But before we do that, there are groups that are organizing on bigger scales. For example, Medicine Forward, who I work with and who Paul's familiar with and has done some work with too. We're building up towards an audio documentary called Prescribe Hope to really break down some of those barriers to mental health treatment for clinicians, top to bottom. And I'm super excited about that because I think we're getting close, and hopefully by the time this episode comes out, we're under production. So stay tuned. But back to my question for you, Dominic, I'd like to hear maybe about the format of how you get people together, how many people are there, how do people get in touch with you, that kind of thing.
Thank you. So physiciansanonymous.org, one word, physiciansanonymous.org. Everything is accessible through our website. If you look at anonymous meetings, the tab there, you'll see a calendar link, and you'll be able to access our anonymous peer support meetings. So that's our main offering, is physician-run, physician-led and facilitated meetings. And there are a bunch available, and we are kind of torn between expanding organically. So when we have a limit for a number that can come into a group, and then if that gets full, then on a regular basis, then do we grow more groups? And that's a very slow organic growth. Or the alternative is to build 10, 20 groups, and if you build it, they will come, and see what happens. But as a not-for-profit, at the moment, all of our facilitators are volunteers, mostly physicians, but we also have 2 psychologists who are passionate about the well-being space and have strong connections with physicians in different ways. And so the main thing is the peer support. It's not on record. We never need to know your name. Videos on or off, entirely up to you. You just need to be a physician or a med student to join, and you can be from anywhere in the world, but 90 or more % are from the US. So that's the main. The second one is coaching. So again, coaching is a non-clinical intervention. There's nothing ever on record. It is not therapy. It is not psychiatric treatment, but all of our coaches are highly qualified. They're independent practitioners. As coaches, they're all either MDs, or I think we have 1 JD, and so they're all highly experienced and passionate about the space as well, to have been approved by us and on our database, and they really help with one-to-one confidential coaching. So that's around finding, what are my mental blocks, what are my self-limiting beliefs, what are my things that I could be changing in the way I approach things that could help. Things like also dealing with circumstances that I just cannot get a perspective on because I'm in them, but it's so helpful to talk to someone on the outside, and it's always helpful to talk to a fellow physician who gets it in a different way. And then finally, we reckon prevention is better than cure. Good old public health approach. So we developed a service or a product called the burnout vaccine, and that is based on a number of randomized controlled trials looking at preventing different burnout metrics. So emotional exhaustion, imposter syndrome, career self-confidence, so on, that sort of thing. And so we combined some really good trials. The process is used in a number of good trials, as well as things that we have been told would have been really useful for physicians to learn early on, ideally at med school and residency, or early as an attending, the stuff that helps you move from thriving to thriving, but med school and residency don't have time to teach you. So ironically, right, self-care. We are the worst. Physicians are the absolute worst at looking after ourselves. We will die to look after our patients, but we will go into renal failure because we haven't drunk or gone to the toilet in 36-hour shift, right? And I'm talking from personal experience here. You're all nodding. There is no doubt that this is reality. We're terrible at self-care, and somewhere along the line, it's inculcated into our brains that self-care is selfish. That if you stop to breathe and drink and eat, then someone somewhere, patient, is going to be disadvantaged. And I actually think that it's the other way around. That selfish care is not selfish. I give better service when I'm hydrated and normoglycemic than not, and not sleep deprived. Paul, I can see you want to say something there.
Yeah, you're reminding me now of my very first mentor when I was still in college, who taught a rather verbose mantra, but I learned it because it meant so much to me. He said, a leader is someone who has enough left over after taking care of themselves to take care of somebody else. That definition of leadership really helped me in my professional career because it said, take care of yourself first or you won't have enough left over for anyone. I wish we would teach that to everybody in medicine.
Well, we would love to be able to have this as standardized curriculum. I mean, self-care is the basic pillar of what we teach. But and it's, when I say teach, it's more of a journey. It's our teaching is facilitated by physician coaches. We take typically younger doctors on a journey of, this is you here now. How do you want to be practicing? What do you see when you're 40, 50, 60? Are you seeing yourself burnt out and addicted? Or are you, what can you be doing now? What's stressing you out now? And therefore, what are the things we can change and what are the things we can't? The 12 steps or anti-prayer. So things like, getting enough sleep, dealing with bullying, dealing with imposter syndrome, and the basics of things like mental health as it applies to doctors, and putting on the table that we are human beings, and actually, by virtue of having that MD or DO or MBBS after your name, your risks of a number of particularly psychiatric disorders are higher than the average population. So what are you going to do about it? Simple science, but life-changing for people that can adopt these principles. Now, what is our main problem? Our main problem is that we do not want the burnout vaccine to become another mandatory course that people resent, and that adds to all the other mandatory courses that people have to do, right? On top of it, usually in their spare time. So our main barrier has been finding organizations that say, we hear you, we love and want to invest in our most highly trained staff and most expensive staff. What we're going to do is give them protected time to do this. Just 1 hour a week for 12 weeks. So if you know any organizations that care about their physicians and actually want them to do this in a meaningful way, let us know.
I'm going to tell you one right now, because you just reminded me of another thing that happened in my history. Is I had 12 hours of training in mindfulness meditation, paid for by my malpractice insurance company.
Love it. Yeah.
Why? Because they found out that mindful doctors would get sued less.
Yep. Non-burned out doctors get sued less.
Go figure.
If you're burned out, you make more medical errors. And there is a figure attached, I forget what it is, but it is in the billions of dollars every year, attached to physician burnout. So it makes money sense.
More importantly, if you're burned out, even if you don't make an error that hurts a patient, you're hurting yourself.
Yeah. But we don't talk about that as physicians. Self-care is selfish.
Right.
We have more than the administrative and systemic and funding and God knows what else problems that we have. We have a cultural issue. We self-select for the high achievers, conscientiousness, obsessiveness, right? Self-sacrificing, and that is well and good because you need that to be a physician. But you shouldn't sacrifice yourself to death. You should still be well enough, and your cup should be full enough to pour out. And that's what we're trying to teach.
So, Dominic, in your institution, in your organization, is there a service component?
Absolutely. So, when we say for our facilitators, if you want to become a facilitator, you have to pass the "Is my coffee cup full enough to pour out" test before you even consider being of service to others. It's slightly different to 12 steps, right? Because being of service to others is essential for recovery in 12 steps. Whereas in Physicians Anonymous, we say, we'd love it. We depend on volunteers. We rely on you, but only if your oxygen mask is applied to yourself first, only if your coffee cup is full enough.
Right. But what I was thinking of, a next level service to the medical community would be for docs who have been burnt out but come into recovery from burnout to do what one of my friends did at my local hospital. He was the chief of staff, and he disappeared, and everyone wondered what was wrong with him. He was just gone, and he was actually in a treatment program for 78 days and came back from his narcotics addiction to tell everyone that he had been in treatment with a narcotics addiction and wanted to start a physician wellness program, which he did.
Beautiful.
And ran for years. And, that's now an institution at my hospital. But what a gift. What a gift.
This is, I love when I get to do an episode and I can pretty much just sit here and listen and occasionally chime in with something humorous. And this was one of those. This was a beautiful conversation between the two of you that I had the pleasure and the honor to frankly just listen to. This is fantastic. I know, Dominic, you had an opportunity to impart information about your website and stuff. Paul, I'd like to give you that opportunity as well. How can people get a hold of you? What's your website? What are you working on? Fill us in a little bit.
I'm public on Facebook under my name. I'm all over LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active there. I have my own website, but it's only to tell clinical stories. And I told one or two today, but I've posted about 15 or 16. It's called Dr. Paul Tales. So drpaultales.com. And actually, I used my Facebook friends as a focus group in order to get that name. So that's been a lot of fun. I just posted another one today. You can reach me at pb@syncmd.com. That's my easiest email, because I'm the medical director of the world's first secure mobile personal health network, SyncMD. So that's fun too. Keeps me from, letting my mind burn out.
And all this information will be in the show notes with the podcast. We usually get a Ripple Challenge question, and I think we're going to end with it. And it'll be interesting to see where this goes. There's no rules to this, gentlemen, so you can answer however you like. But I thought with the Olympics coming up, I might do a little bit of something along those lines. So, swimming or track and field? Dominic?
Oh, man. Swimming for me, ideally in cold water. I know it is a little bit of a fad, but last summer I started cold water swimming, and it has been an absolute godsend. And I think the mechanism of action is when you get out of the cold water, everything else feels so much better. Life is just so much more bearable when you're not in freezing cold water. So I love swimming, and actually in a decent swimming pool, that flow state of just up and down, it's very meditative. Love it. At school, I could not run to save my life, so I'd be the last kid picked. So never track and field for me, I'm afraid.
How about you, Paul?
You're reminding me of a childhood trauma. I learned to swim in Lake Huron, which was 56 degrees. And when I had to jump off the raft for my first swimming test as a beginner, I had a panic attack on the way there, my first one in my life. I think I was 10 years old. So I'm still afraid of drowning, but that doesn't stop me from picking swimming. Katie Ledecky, Michael Phelps, and if you haven't seen it yet, Annette Benning and Jodie Foster in Naiad, about Diana Naiad swimming from Cuba to the Florida Keys, an unbelievable achievement at 62 years old. Unbelievable. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Gotta watch that
Swimming.
one. Yeah.
So I guess I'll be the lone dissenter and say track and field here. I guess maybe in part because I hate cold water and maybe I need to learn there, Dominic. But my oldest is also a very talented runner. He's got his mile down to 4:14, and it's been an absolute joy to watch him excel. You know what? This was a beautiful conversation, and I thank you both for joining us. And as always, I'm going to end with, what positive ripple of change will you create today?
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Dominic.